The show is a proud member of the Retirement Podcast Network. Stay single until someone actually complements your life in a way that makes it better to not be single. Unknown. Welcome to the show dedicated to helping you not just survive retirement, but to have the confidence because you're doing the work to really lean in and rock it. And it's having that confidence which is key, knowing that you can do it, feeling empowered. Welcome to 2025. It's the first football day, hangover day, maybe for some of you, not me. Welcome to 2025, hangover day. I don't know why, that's kid stuff. I'm excited about 2025. I'm excited about January. We're going to face challenges this month and this year, but we're still going to have a great year. Because we're going to be intentional about it. We're starting off the year in a way I like, and that is by talking with Tanya Nichols about retiring single. And that's kicking off this month's series of our Retirement Plan Live. This is our live case study. We always do it in January. This January, we're focusing on not just one, but two individuals that are at or near retirement, single with no children. So they're facing a different type of retirement. And we're not just looking at one person. We chose someone and we're like, wouldn't it be great to have a male and a female perspective of and how they perceive things, what they're excited about, what they're worried about? I think that would be a great contrast. And maybe they're identical. We'll find out together over this month. So here's how the month is going to work. Today, we're going to talk with Tanya Nichols from Align Financial about some of the aspects around retiring as a single person with no children. We get into real planner mode of all the things to consider. And it's not a Debbie Downer because there's a lot of great things, but we're planners, so that's how that goes. But we're going to set that table. Next week, we're going to meet our two subjects, and we're going to learn about what their values are and learn a little bit about how they got to where they are today. Just their background. And then on the 15th, the third episode of the month, we're going to focus on what are their goals. What does their ideal lifestyle look like in retirement? And then on the 22nd, my birthday, by the way, and Tracy Austin's, we're going to organize their resources. What do they have to pay for this ideal retirement? The last episode of the month, on the 29th, we're going to talk about some of the aspects of aging as a single person. How does one navigate that? There won't be any clear answers, but you want to have a framework for how it might be dealt with. And then as always, in early February, I guess, we're going to have a result show where the subject, in this case, two subjects, will be live with us and we'll work through the vision and the feasible pillars of retirement planning to get a sense of where there are opportunities of risks for them to continue that journey. Now, I'm not sure if we're going to have one or two live meetups since we got two people. We might have to do two, so stay tuned for that. If you want to get access to some of the worksheets that I mention throughout the month, sign up for our 6-Shot Saturday email, which is a weekly email where it recaps the show and we send links to resources that we mention or that we create. You can do that at RogerWhitney.com. We got some interesting things happening with that email, by the way. All right, that's a lot. Let's get talking with Tanya. All right, we're kicking off the new year with one of my favorite people, Tanya Nichols from Align Financial. Tanya, how are you?
Good morning, Roger.
Next week, we introduce two solo volunteers for the case study, a man and a woman. We're going to do concurrent stories, which we've never done before. So I thought we'd kick this off because you have a lot of expertise in helping manage retirement in general, but with single people as well as women, which is part of your practice. So I thought we'd kick it off in talking about some of the planning aspects of retirement planning for singles. So as we're thinking about this, what's like the first thing that comes to mind about this special category of single people retiring?
Well, I think like the facts are the same. right? They still have to make decisions about Social Security and whether to roll over their pension or take it as a monthly option, how to invest their funds and when to retire. They still have a lot of those same problems or opportunities that they have to address. But I think it is different in the fact that you don't have a partner in the process. And that might change the lens with which you're examining some of these different issues.
I think that's an important concept, is that 90+% of the journey is the same. You just have these different considerations. You're not going to have two Social Securities. You're going to be in a single tax bracket. It's just slightly different fact set, but it rhymes pretty closely with anybody else that's planning.
Right.
Question, unrelated to singles. Would you say for almost everyone that is the case, even if you have a special needs child, you're still dealing with the same issues, but now you have this overlay of a separate issue that maybe others aren't dealing with, but the process should still be relatively similar?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it just takes a different, I think overlay is a great word for it. I also think it might become a bigger focus if you have a special needs child, or, everybody just has different priorities. If somebody's lifespan, they maybe have a chronic illness that's going to change the way that they think about retirement, like that's going to affect all of their decisions.
That's another great overlay, right?
Yes, yes.
Now, Tanya and I actually recorded this segment when I was in Colorado, and I left the memory card in Colorado. So it's like the lost tapes. When I die, then maybe find them and publish them. But actually,
lots of secrets on those tapes.
But I think it actually was a good thing, because when we first talked, it felt like we were just saying, this is hard. These are all the things that you have to worry about. So I think that actually it's healthy that we get to redo this, because we got into deep planner mode for a while.
Right.
So assuming that we all understand the basics of building a retirement plan of record, let's start there. Is if you're single and you don't have children and you're facing retirement, what are some of the things that are overlaying on top of the normal planning process in your mind?
I think one of the items that stands out for me is, instead of maybe making sure like your spouse is taken care of financially if you're gone early, you end up wondering, let's assume that your plan is feasible and that you have enough funds to kind of do the things you want to do. I have a lot of, and women in particular, single women, who are like, all right, so it's the end of my retirement. I have enough money, but now what happens if I need somebody to come help? Like, what happens if I can't take care of things? So I think that becomes a little bit different view, or maybe it's addressed sooner than maybe it would typically be dealt with in a married situation. And then the other one that comes to mind is this idea of legacy for my singles without kids, especially. You really can think about that differently, where for a lot of married couples and singles with kids, you just end up thinking, oh, well, my kids get all my wealth. And so we start to push into that conversation, I think, a little deeper, to imagine how they want that to serve other people, or like, how do you want it to serve you more during your lifetime? If maybe legacy isn't a priority, what could you do that was bigger and made a bigger impact on you or others during your lifetime, because the idea of legacy maybe isn't as important in that case? There are a couple things that stand out.
I'm definitely dealing with that in a number of relationships in our practice, of single, no children, in this case, well overfunded. How do I be a steward of this money? Because there isn't that natural legacy. I'm reading Gospel of Wealth by Andrew Carnegie right now that talks a little bit about that. And there's a tension there, isn't there, Tanya? Because the thing that you started with is early in retirement, as a single person, you have to do it as a couple, but as a single person, you have to be more intentional, or you feel more intentional about the contingency plans of what if what if I need assistance, right? Which is a tension between that and giving the money away or spending it early. So that tension might be a little bit more acute.
Right. Especially when, if let's say you have a plan to work part-time early in retirement, and there's a health change or a change in the business that you were going to work for or work with that now you can't work part-time anymore. And that was a part of your plan to make it feasible. So if there aren't any other levers to pull in that instance, you're the one. And so I think you're right. There is a tension between you got to make sure to provide for yourself, and that's on you to figure out. But then do you feel brave enough or confident enough that there is enough of a surplus to do some of those things during your lifetime?
I think another thing that is missing, that's not built in if you're single, is having a thinking partner. I'll use myself as an example. And I've always had a professional coach of sorts, and I'm lucky to have awesome people like you I can call. Tanya, what do I do? To give me perspective, because I'm in the center of my hurricane, or the eye of my hurricane, and I can't see about, is it okay to do this? And usually a spouse or a partner is going to help serve that to sort of calm you down or lift you up. I've noticed that as one difference that you have to figure out how do you navigate. So have you seen any successful ways of doing that?
I agree with that completely. And I think where I've seen success is when people really intentionally create either groups or partnerships where they're kind of exchanging those ideas, talking about their worries or their hopes, and working together to kind of create a project. Of course, firms like ours, mine and yours, that's the work that we're doing with them, is serving as that thinking partner. But I've seen some really cool examples of that in the club with some of the members who've been around a long time. They've created these clubs. They even have like names, or created these groups. They even have names for themselves. And they just serve as their own kind of board of, I forget what they call it, like board of directors or board of advisors or something like that. And that can be really powerful. But what you have to do when you're creating that is be very intentional and be open to being vulnerable. And maybe not just about the numbers. I know in one of those groups, a spouse had died. And so they started talking about, hey, will you take care of, if something happens to me, will you help distribute my estate to my kids? And so they even started serving in some of those functions, which I think is really neat to see happen.
Which you do have to be vulnerable. And some of us are easier at making those friendships from scratch. I think the phrase is, it's very difficult to make a new old friend. Right. And, let's take you and I as an example, because we've been chatting. I mean, we met over a decade ago, but we've been chatting very regularly for 6-7 years. We're old friends now, but we were new friends at the beginning, and it was a risk, and we were feeling out that relationship on what level people are at, right? So it takes some vulnerability. Now, you do this in your life because you're a single woman. You have a cohort of women, I believe, that you guys meet every quarter or something.
Yes, we have a women's group. There's 5 of us. We try to meet twice a month, so every other week. One is more topic focused, and then one is more just like catching up, because we noticed that we like to catch up. So we want to make sure we have opportunities for that. And we're from all over the country. Each of us is in a different age decade, which I think is super valuable, to make sure you're kind of surrounded with people older and younger than you. Although I am the youngest in the group, but
that will change. That will change.
Right. We're going to have to recruit someone new. But I think it's super valuable. So like when I was going to sell my cabin and sell my house in COVID, like everybody else did, and move to town because I lived way out in the woods. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. This is crazy. Like, oh my, what am I doing? And I had just been divorced a year or two prior to that. So I wasn't confident in my decision making at the time, even though I had all the facts and all the skills, brought all that to my group. And I was like, what am I missing? And they were like, you did it. Go do it. And it was just that little extra push that I needed to be like, okay, I did my work on this. I did my research. My priorities are clear and I'm moving forward. So I think they can be really valuable. And it doesn't always have to be about money either.
No.
Life choice too.
And all that catching up part that seems unproductive if you're a type A personality is actually what builds the relational currency to trust people. I don't let people speak into my life if we haven't built that up, that they want the best for me and they're not idiots and all sorts of things. How did you find that group or build that group?
We all were a part of a coaching group for financial advisors that was sort of unique in that it was talking about not just like how to build a great business and serve clients well, but also how to have the life that you want to have. So we were all kind of attracted to that kind of a program. And then we just kept hanging out. There were 60 of us originally, and now there's 5 of us in that one group that still meets a couple times a month.
So if you take off the business coaching aspect of it, that's how you met, but that could be a book club, a Bible study. It could be a pickleball league. So it's one, getting, that old plane in traffic, and then someone teeing up, hey, let's hop on a Zoom or let's go have coffee. You have to be intentional about it, I guess is the point.
You do. And, Mark Troutman, who I believe has been on the show a couple times.
Many times, yeah.
He and I did a session in the Rock Retirement Club about how to build your board of directors. And one of the ideas we had suggested was maybe it's just 2 or 3 of you. Like, it doesn't have to be a lot, but set it for a fixed time frame. So, just say, well, let's do this the first Tuesday of every month for 90 days or 180 days or whatever you feel comfortable with, because it also gives you permission to kind of like stop it if it's not a good fit without necessarily damaging the relationships.
That's an excellent idea. That's an excellent idea. Mark is a great example. So he is single. He is widowed. He's a widower. That's the phrase. And he recently moved to an area where he had a community around the FI community, because that's an area he has. Mark's Money Mind podcast. Awesome. Mark is one of my favorite people, just below Tanya. But he intentionally moved to an area where a lot of these people lived, and they have like a Slack channel or something where, hey, can you drive me to the airport? Can you check on my dog? I got the flu. Can somebody bring me food? So that social network they had to just create intentionally. So looking forward, actually, before we move forward, I think one reason we're talking about this so intentionally is this is a force multiplier for anybody, whether you're married or single, but especially if you're single, is having your group. And, the club provides a way of finding your homies, but there are plenty of other things that you do that do. When we think about the future, usually we think about, aging as a single, we think about long-term care, right? And where will I get the care? But one thing I don't think we think about as much that is, a little bit more unique to a single person is, who's going to help me fix the house, pay the bills, deal with the insurance company, a lot of logistical stuff outside of just simply I have this extra expense because I'm dealing with a long-term care issue. Have you had experience navigating that? What's the protocol that you've developed so far? Because I think this is evolving.
I think it is a reality that if you have a household and you're managing it and you're alone, there's the same amount of work as there is in a household that's being managed by 2 people. So I think the reality is your costs to manage that household may be more, but the men and women that I see do this well, they just start to imagine, like, think about the things that take you kind of below the line that are driving you crazy, that you just stress out about. And if you can find people to help you with this, the amount of support that they feel by just little things, like it could be a house cleaner or something just simple and basic like that, but it could be like paying the guy. I know a neighbor woman of mine just was divorced and she loves Christmas lights. And so she paid somebody to put Christmas lights up because it made her so happy. And for a lot of the folks that listen to your show, I know, there's a lot of frugal folks out there. And that might be a mindset shift that has to take place. But those are just little ways, I think, in which you can trade money and in return receive support in areas of your life that might just really drag you below the line, so to speak. And Did I miss your question?
No, it totally answered the question. Oh. Yeah. And I think okay, this is actually building a social network of sorts of, but just in the more practical way of having, I'm thinking of someone that's 60 today, but they're thinking about their 70 or 80-year-old self, right? Being single with no children. This is the time to create relationships with a handy person, with a CPA, or even if it's the local H&R Block, that's one area we're doing taxes. Maybe you do your own taxes right now, but what are you going to do when you're 75? That actually is an area where it gets really difficult, and CPAs generally don't want to deal with that. So even if it's an H&R Block, start to make relationships at the office because they'll rotate. So you have some consistency. Who's going to help navigate healthcare? Who's going to change your light bulb? Who can you trust? Because there's a lot of people that you can't trust, from a craftsman standpoint, because everybody's an individual contractor. Now's the time to start building that infrastructure. I have a question for you, Tanya. As you're single and retiring, ultimately, does this lean towards you should consider more closely a safety first approach at some point in your retirement in terms of taking money that you have and turning on guaranteed income for later years?
Well, it's interesting that you ask that. And this could be my bias, but with the clients that I'm working with, we actually prefer flexibility. And oftentimes, a safety first requires some permanent decision making early on. And while I don't disagree that that can be a really great option for some, if I'm working with someone through the transition of retirement, in those first few years, usually we're focusing on creating the most flexible plan possible, which often means just making the least amount of permanent decisions possible, I guess.
Yeah, I totally agree.
That's my take.
I totally agree with that. And Jim Saulnier and their process, they talk a lot about safety first. But even in their process, they'll just have a contingency plan for a later decision to purchase safety first. Or we're talking about, guaranteed income, annuity, or something else. And I think I agree with you. We're agile, right? That's my favorite word. I'm thinking about having some roadmap that when you're 70 or 75, that you start to pivot a little bit in order to, one, just make it all easier, two, protect you from fraud, because you're not going to rob all the money, just the paycheck. And as you're aging by yourself, you're not aware of cognitive issues. I mean, we're not even talking Alzheimer's, just decision-making and speed of understanding. But I agree with you, and especially early on, the flexibility.
And I think it is an issue that is going to be, there's so many people in this category that are moving into those decades. There has to be a solve for this somehow. And whether it's, community groups and building these networks we're talking about, or services being offered. I think in bigger metro areas, it's more probable to be able to find some of those services. I know in my small town in northern Minnesota, they just don't really exist unless you're someone without any resources, and then you have some options available. But it is really hard to kind of create some of these things. But I think the demand for it, I think you just had this Christine Benz on, and you guys were talking about it as she was dealing this with her mom that was aging. I think the demand for this is going to be so high that there will be a solve at some point, or better or more solutions available anyways.
And if you're married and listening to this, this doesn't apply to me. I'm so lucky I have my family. You know what? There's going to be a point in your life that one of you will be single. God willing, not for a long time, but there will be one point when one of you is single. And it may be later in life when you're not as energetic and bluntly sharp to navigate, how do I figure this all out? Christine Benz and her parents, in our household, my mother-in-law who lost her husband a year and a half ago, and they're having to navigate a whole new world in their 80s, which is harder. A lot to unwrap here. We're going to begin next week in introducing our two subjects, a man and a female. So we're going to have two different perspectives. And I think this was a good primer of the overlay of being single with no children. Some of the issues, not a lot of solutions. I think there aren't a lot of solutions other than having a good process for being logical about it. Any last words from you, Tanya?
No, sir. Thank you for having me today.
Sir. See, that's what young people say to people like me. All right. I'll talk to you soon. As always, let's get to some of your questions so we can help you take a baby step towards rocking retirement. We're not going to have a lot of room for questions this month with two different subjects, so I want to make sure we get some in. Our first question comes from Lauren, related to a new type of mortgage product. Lauren says, hello, I am considering an all-in-one loan to get my house paid off sooner so I can rock retirement sooner. Maybe you've done an episode on this type of loan. If not, would really love to hear your thoughts. And she shared a website on lifechangerloan.com. Definitely not recommending it. I don't know enough about it. We looked at this, Lauren. It describes a home loan that merges your mortgage with your personal banking, like your checking and savings account. And it looks like in their product, the mortgage is also your checking account. So any deposits automatically lower your home principal balance, and withdrawals. It's a dynamic thing that uses the equity in your home as a checking account of sorts. So if you have savings, let's say you have $50,000 in savings in your banking account, that actually reduces the principal of your loan, which in turn will, potentially save you interest. I've never encountered a loan mortgage like this, Lauren. And be honest with you, any new product like this that's sold rather than bought, I'm extremely wary of. Typically, I want to let these things be out in the market and used and have some track record before I would engage in a product like this, especially with your home mortgage and your banking. So personally, Lauren, this might be the next best thing. I don't know, but I would say the KISS principle here is to keep it simple. If you have a mortgage and you're trying to pay it off, you can throw extra money towards that mortgage and reduce the principal. If you have enough equity, you can have a home equity line of credit that if you need to get money out, you can do that. I would keep this simple, Lauren, and take a wait and see approach on this and not overcomplicate it. When you have newer products like this, where they haven't really been in the market to be examined and poked around and see how they work out, there are a lot of unknown unknowns. And that's where the gotchas are. The unintended consequences that we just can't identify because there's not enough experience in the market. For your banking and your mortgage, I would likely not do this because there are too many unknown unknowns. Our next question comes from Jim, asking about tracking down old 401ks. Hey, Roger and team, wondering if any of you had experience tracking down old 401ks. My wife recently found out about one from a company she worked for in the 90s. She got a letter from the Social Security office telling her the plan may still exist and listed the name of the administrator, but that information has led us nowhere so far. The original company has new owners and they did not keep the 401k plan in question. And the listed administrator seems to be a dead end. A Google search sent us to a firm in Indiana, and that was a dead end. Do old 401ks eventually get dissolved in these situations? I can totally see how this is frustrating. When a company gets bought or sold or goes bankrupt, the money doesn't disappear. Your wife's 401k should still be safe, Jim, but it's in limbo. It likely got absorbed by another 401k that didn't have good contact information for her, and they don't know how to reach you. You don't know how to reach it. So it just sort of hangs out there, just like lost money at the government. But there should be some administrator of a plan. The IRS keeps the Social Security Administration aware of private employer benefits known as deferred vested benefits, like 401k plans. Then when people file Social Security claims, Social Security Administration sends a letter about those benefits. It helps people like your family, in this case your wife, Jim, find out about those benefits. So a couple suggestions are you can go to the Department of Labor website to find the most recent annual report filed by your wife's plan. It's called the Form 5500, and it may be one that is an old plan. You might have to look back in time for the last 5500, which is essentially the regulatory report of the 401k plan. We will have a link to the website to at least search this, and hopefully it won't be a dead end for you. Or you can use the webpage or call the Department of Labor and talk to a benefits advisor. They may be able to help you track this down. I have not gone on this journey, Jim. So if anybody out there listening has dealt with this and you have a suggestion, feel free to send us a message at rogerwhitney.com or reply to Six Shot Saturday, and perhaps we can help Jim and his wife on this treasure hunt. Our next question comes from Greg, who's learning from family experience. Say, hey, Roger and team. I'm the family member that does the taxes for my mother, my sister, my brother, my daughter, and ourselves. As I see my mother's health and memory fail, I'm wondering what the best ways are to transition from being the preparer to someone else being the preparer. I would not like to burden our daughter. I suspect that you have tackled this in the past, so please direct me to the podcast and I'll try to absorb the guidance. Actually, Greg, we have not addressed this in the past. So if you are the tax preparer for your mother and your family members, that's a burden, right? That's a project. It's multiple projects if you're doing it for multiple people. Factor in your mother who is getting older, who likely will need somebody to help her with her taxes over time. I would suggest for everybody but your mother to have them find a CPA or teach them how to use the tax software that you're most comfortable with. It's an important skill. And unless they have complicated taxes, it's relatively straightforward, even though it may be intimidating for them. Everything is intimidating until you do it. So some of this might be resistance because, numbers. And we've seen this in the club all the time in learning the software and people building their own plan. It's a little intimidating just because it's new and it's getting the reps in. So you may have to help them get over that barrier. And once they start to get some reps in, they can use you as customer support. And most of the popular financial or tax planning software have support that they can sign up for. So I think it's worth them learning how to do it. It's actually a lot easier, assuming you have you don't have a complicated tax situation. Now let's talk about your mother. This is an issue because even if she's lucky to have you, but I have had many instances with elderly people who have had a CPA, that CPA retires and some young person takes it over and essentially abandons them. And so that is not a good situation. I can think of one in particular where lady we don't even know if her taxes were filed for a couple of years yet because we can't get any communication from G2 of this particular CPA firm, which is annoying. I would suggest for her that you help her use an H&R Block or in-person tax service and start to build a relationship, if not with a person, but an office. Her taxes are going to be probably pretty simple, right? If they're pretty simple, you could do them. No need to try to get her to do them, but having a local office that she can go to and that you or your brother or your daughter in your stead can go to if there's a problem will create some relationship. And then I would put it to you or someone in your family to be the prompter of that. That is probably a better way of doing it than going to a CPA firm. There's a lack of supply of CPAs and tax preparers. And the ones that are accepting clients, typically they're not that responsive. We're working on building a list of CPA firms for our clients because it's really difficult. Aaron Coe on our team, who's an EA, enrolled agent. So you don't need a CPA. You need an enrolled agent can represent and do taxes. She may have some comments on this related to it. So if she gives me any, I will make sure to share that feedback. And if anybody else has walked this journey a little bit more than we have, obviously you can let us know and we'll try to share that with Greg. All right, with that, let's set a smart sprint.
On your marks, get set.
Now it's time to set a smart sprint, a little baby step you can take in the next 7 days to not just rock retirement, but rock life. All right, in the next 7 days, I want you to establish a file, digital or physical, for year-end statements from all of your accounts, mortgage statement, 401k, 403b, brokerage account, anything you got. for your year-end statements and any tax information you get from those providers. Set it up so you have it when you start to receive some of this stuff. Because if you don't, what will generally happen, or I've seen happen personally, is you just start putting it in piles and it's not organized. And this will be something that you'll be thankful that you did a month or so from now when you start to prepare all your documents. Now it's time for our latest installment of the missions flown by Zygmunt Kanzler in a B-17 in World War II. We've been doing this. We're on mission number 10 now, July 14th. Ship number 437, Sortie 7, was the only one of the crew that flew today. Target was an oil refinery in Budapest, Hungary. Target was hit with fair results. Enemy aircraft encountered, but we came through. We had P-51s and 38 escorts. Flak was heavy and very accurate, carried 12 500-pound bombs, mission 7.5 hours at 23,000 feet. You notice that he said he was the only one of the crew to fly today, and I don't know from the whole population of B-17 crews, but I do know that my grandfather volunteered a lot, and you'll see that at the end when you look at how quickly he was able to complete all those missions. So that was mission number 10. Wishing you a happy new year. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance reference is historical and does not guarantee future results. All indices are unmanaged and cannot be invested in directly. Make sure you consult your legal, tax, or financial advisor before making any decisions.